Welcome back. We are joined today by Emmanuel Todd. I would say one of the most fascinating intellectuals we have in Europe, a historian, demographer, and sociologist. So thank you for coming on. It's a true
Well, so
privilege.
thank you for inviting me.
So you're very well known for in 1976 having predicted the pending collapse of the Soviet Union at a time when it seemed to be all powerful, and you then predicted the breakdown of the US-led international order in your 2001 book, again when the US was seemingly at the height of its power. And your most recent book is called The Defeat of the West. So when you make predictions, people pay attention now for very good reason. But I thought I wanted to ask first, though, because this is one of the very fascinating things, is the variables you look at. That is, what are the indicators you look for when you measure the rise and fall of great powers?
Yes, well, basically, I'm not a geopolitician. You see, I'm not concerned in a way when the geopolitics is a sort of first thing. I'm a historian and a social anthropologist. And what's more, I'm the kind of historian that was produced by what we call in France the Annales School. It's interested in the long duration phenomena, and and the variables I'm using to understand history are the variables I was taught as a student. You see, basically uh, I'm not a rebel. You see, I'm just a a very serious student, and I was first trained working on 18th century peasants, reconstituting with the reconstitution of family and household structures and the life of ordinary people. I was trained in historical demography with variables of mortality, birth rates, and so on, and and so I'm quite used to looking at at what's deep and basic in the structure of societies, and trying to. It's kind of natural for me to uh, focus on long-term trends. If well, well, for me the classic and example, the first example is the way I predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union. At the time, everybody was uh, well doing criminology or working on very superficial or falsified economic data. And I just one day, I came across the infant death rate and in the Soviet Union, and specifically in Russia, Ukraine, and other parts of the Soviet Union. And I noticed that the infant death rate had started rising again between 1970 and 1974, and that after that date, the Russians had stopped publishing the data, and I immediately I had a hunch. You see, I just, well, this is very important. This means that the system is, it's not prediction. It's just direct and observation of the disintegration of the system had already started. You see, and well, that's the way I proceed. I other indicators. I'm interested in long-term trends in education, religion, uh, not so much politics, in fact. But it would be preposterous for me to say that I have some kind of method. You see, I spend my life uh, looking at figures. You see, uh, I enjoy reading statistical handbooks and fishing for data, whatever they are. You see, that's the way I function.
Yeah, well, it's always interesting when someone takes a different approach, because when everyone's thinking the same way, no one's thinking, as they say. But in your book, though, your next prediction, as it is the defeat of the West. I guess my question then would be twofold. That is, what does defeat mean in your framework, and I guess also why? What is it? Why is the West being defeated?
Yeah, so the book is well, the title is "The Defeat of the West," and it's not the victory of Russia. You see, the main well, the 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 book it is pretty methodical in its construction. It's I raise a few questions at the beginning, and then I study Russia, the new stability of Russia, then the what's the meaning, the real meaning of Ukraine, and then I move on to Europe, uh, and then to Britain and the United States. To me, the real subject of the book is the disintegration of the Anglo-American world. It's of course there is a general explanation, a thing, a model. But as far as I can remember, I'm sorry, I've gone back to studying the Bronze Age, so I'm not completely into geopolitics these days. I'm very sorry. I'm doesn't mean that I'm not a serious and concerned citizen, but it's but the general idea of the book is that uh, the disintegration of the Soviet Union got us into a false representation of the way history was moving. This was wrongly interpreted as a victory of the West, uh, with as significance the superiority of the Western or Anglo-American model or conception of society, capitalism, liberal democracy, and so on, and as a failure of communism. A failure of communism, it certainly was. But what people hadn't noticed at the time, that as early as the middle 1960s, the American society had started its long-term decline. It was already possible to observe a decline in educational standards, an industrial decline, well, all types of decline. And what happened then was a sort of a mad, when you think of it in sort of general historical terms, sort of mad, the expansion of an already disintegrating system, you see, with something hollow at the center moving, uh, following the collapse of the Soviet system, with NATO moving into Eastern Europe, threatening Russia. There comes a point there you get to a point when Russia, after a very difficult period, gets stable again, reveals itself as deeply attached to its own sovereignty, and says stop, and and that's enough. And then the war in Ukraine appears as a sort of a reality test, and what appears is the I would say the massive weakness of the West. Am I clear? Do you?
Yes,
It,
it's
and that and what's important to me is to go beyond the. Of course, I'm following what goes on uh, in the war itself, I mean, what's happening in Ukraine is tragic, and I know now that we're very close to a complete collapse of the Ukrainian army and regime. But to me, what's important, again, it's long-term terms. I do remember quite well the moment when I wrote the book. That was in the summer of 2023, just in the mid of the Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive. Everybody was in the West was boasting about the great successes of the Ukrainians and the inevitable collapse of the Putin regime and so on. And I just remember I was in my very small house in Brittany, and I was very calm and determined, and without any hesitation of any kind, I was writing the defeat of the West is certain. And why could I be so certain? Because uh, uh, I'm I'm not dealing in TV programs and superficial data. It's I had my analysis of the collapse of the industrial economy in the US, the decline of the educational level, the flight out of manual work, the leading to a lack of engineers. One of the most important, I would say that if you take my first book, uh, The Final Fall, the one on the coming collapse of the Soviet Union, I would say that my main statistical indicator was the infant death rate. In the case of the defeat of the West, I suddenly realized this now, this very moment. The central indicator in my book is I remember the way when I succeeded in getting an estimate of the number of engineers getting out of US and Russian universities or technical centers or whatever they're called. And when I just was able to calculate that the Russians, with a population 2.5 times smaller than that of the US, were able to produce more engineers. Engineers are, and well, when you say engineers, you must think engineers plus technicians, qualified workers, everything concerned with producing material things, and this is the core element. And I just knew that the US doesn't have the means to pursue the war because they don't have the people, they don't have the kind of labor force that's necessary. And well, I know that these days the Pentagon and the Rand Corporation just agree with me. There's no question about it. That's the way I function. I'm not trying to give a sort of general and detailed analysis of thing. I'm just trying to give people a feeling of the way I function.
Yeah. No, well, I remember the counteroffensive in 2023 as well. The media coverage and the discourse as well. I felt there was a alternate reality like this. I didn't understand how they could read it in this way. But the way you speak,
The word reality, it ought to be the central word these days, because moving in and out of reality is very much the game we play these days.
you seem to have something in common as well, though, with Thomas Piketty, because he also makes this argument that as the Cold War has come to an end and the Soviet Union thereafter collapsed, the Anglo-American model was already exhausted, but because of what was seen as victory, there was this hubris. So in victory one assumes one has all the answers, and instead of trying to seek economic recovery and rebuilding society, which had been exhausted by a lot of this neoliberal economics, we instead put gas fully down and steamed ahead. And this is then, as you suggested, exacerbated a lot of those structural weaknesses. But you then look at the family.
Yes, I very much agree with this. There's one thing we could add, and that's one of the things I'm working on, apart from the Bronze Age. It's the in its most the most efficient period in the history of Western capitalism was, in fact, the period when the USSR was okay. You see, it's as if the existence of of communism had made optimal capitalism possible. You see, with a social conscience, with an active state, and well, a capitalism that had to use some of the good tools suggested by socialism and communism. And as soon as the USSR collapsed, and when the collapse was interpreted as a sort of general collapse of anything invented by socialism or planners or anything, then the decline of the West accelerated, in fact, because they had lost something that was necessary to a proper, smooth functioning of capitalism.
Yeah, that's also John Hertz. He famously wrote in the 50s that liberal ideologies work best when they're in opposition to outdated form of governance. Once they're without competition, they begin to destroy themselves, which seems
But
to be
that's even better said. Yeah, that's it.
well. If we look then at the demography, education, family, the loss of cultural coherence, secular nihilism, are all of these like red flags you see currently, though, in across the political West?
Yes, I mean the yes, the new thing in this book is it's a new emphasis on religion and the decline of religion. You see, my real trade is the study of family systems. You see, that's the only field in which I'm truly competent. Well, give me any part of the world, I'll give you a description of the basic family system, and I can get it to regional differences. Take any country. Well, let's not do it, but I could do it. Now, and no, it's important because when I look at social systems, I do not see states' ideologies. I see mentalities derived from family systems. For example, the weakness of the West these days is the West, the core, the Anglo-American world and France, or northern France, is that the basic anthropological structure is the nuclear family. As early as the Middle Ages, it's that when you look at households, all you could see was the father, mother, children, and nothing else. And the time of marriage, the children had to move out of the family, and this explains this makes it possible to explain the great flexibility of the Western world. Whereas in Germany, you had what's called a stem family. That's eldest son inheritance and vertical family systems with a great deal of authority and inequality. In the case of Russia, you could find among Russian peasants what I call the community or communitarian family. That father, his sons, with women exchange like parcels between families at the time of marriage, but something that uh, when the community family disintegrated, it sort of transmitted its values to communism. That's authority, equality, and so on. And this, of course, communism collapsed for economic reasons, but there's still something left in Russian culture of this community feeling, and which explains the resilience of Russia and the stability of Russian society after the sufferings of the 1990s. And knowing this is what makes it possible for me to say that the problem is not Putin, the Putin regime, or fascism from above. It's that that makes it social anthropology makes it possible to see Russia as or Putin as produced by Russian culture rather than Putin manipulating uh, Russian society. And of course, this I've sort of a instinctive feeling of the stability of Russian society because of this social anthropological knowledge. But to come to the point, uh, in this book, I add a new variable that is really central, and it is not a very center of my research work, and that's religion. I have a description of the decline of religion. Uh, I'm, I'm not religious at all myself. I'm not a believer. I'm not. I've no nostalgia of anything. You see, I'm just a historian trying to understand things, and so I have this description of the secularization in with three moments. You start with active religion, where people believe in God, and with all the behavior that's associated with this. Then you have what I call zombie religion, when religion disappears, in that people stop believing in God, but retain the values and habits, the morals uh, produced or associated with active religion. This is a moment of great dynamism in the history of society. People are freed from the constraints of tradition, uh, but are left with the possibility of collective action. They have morals. Uh, they keep work habits inherited from the past, and religion is replaced by, well, let's say, ideologies. So take France, for instance, in 1789, the French Revolution starts, well, a few decades after the collapse of religious practice in the Paris Basin. And then you've got a sort of tremendous release of energy. But Catholicism is replaced by uh, the nation, or the Germans would say la grande nation, the great nation, with a measure of hostility to that great nation. Uh, and you got the French Revolution with its very positive value, and every time religion collapses, it sort of releases sort of a new uh, social a new type of social dynamism, and so is that the second stage of zombie religion. But of course, what in France will be the French Revolution with its ideal of liberty and equality because family structures were liberal and egalitarian, while in a country like Germany will produce darker things. Well, no, social democracy is all right, in my view, but Nazism isn't, you see. And social democracy, Nazism would be the zombie stage in Germany. Communism would be the zombie stage after the collapse of the Orthodox religion in Russia. But now, since perhaps perhaps this is the real turn of the beginning of the third millennium, we've reached the state of zero religion, and zero religion is something entirely different. It's when nothing is left. Nothing is left. You no longer have the belief in God, of course, but you've lost the morals, the social habits, the all that makes collective action possible. And this, in that zero stage of religion, people start being overwhelmed by a feeling of meaningless emptiness. And this feeling of emptiness, the feeling that nothing or no value exists, leads to what I call nihilism. So that's a deification of nothing, and an urge to destroy things, people, or destroy reality. In a way back to the world of reality. And I think this is what makes the analysis of what's going on these days in the immediate geopolitical world difficult. It's on the one hand, I'm not forgetting traditional, rational factors. The question of power, the question of control of the economic forces, incomes. You see, I'm not. I told you I'm not a religious person. My contact with reality is complete in a way, and there's and you can build a model of what's going on using the notion of a disintegration of the economic might of the US. I was talking about the lack of engineers, their military industrial base, and so on. All this is rational, and with all this, you can explain much of what is happening in the conflict with Russia. To me, what I'm dealing with is the conflict between the US and Russia. The Ukraine is completely secondary in my view, but if you consider that the lust for power is rational, which I don't, but it seems that many old politicians think power is a rational goal. Well, that's their game. Well, this exists. There's no question. But what I feel these days more and more that to this must be added and taken into account a new, very dangerous, irrational element connected with the zero state of religion, with the emergence of nihilism. And I must admit that in my most recent interviews in France, I more and more speculate on the spread of evil. You see, I'm not being very religious. I'm not used to I'm not used to using concepts of good and evil, but I fear what I feel now is that part of what is happening has much more to do with evil when than with any rational uh, fight or competition for power.
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry, I'm very talkative.
no, it's good. Well,
Even in English, well, just try to imagine how I can be in French. I'm horrible.
well, you mentioned that you're not religious, but Friedrich Nietzsche was also not religious, but in the Death of God, he did nonetheless recognize the societal purpose of religion, though that is, it provided meaning, common beliefs, as you said, the social rules, but also uh, question to what extent secular morality is actually sustainable,
Yeah.
because a lot of we say now we have these values and norms, but to what extent are they actually resting on on a common stable foundation, or we just inherited it from the religious times? Because now it seems a lot of as you said, religion is replaced by ideology, and liberal ideology now is more or less promoted as some kind of a universal religion to organize consensus and rules. But it has some contradictions, because liberalism is supposed to be tolerant, yet it manifests itself, because it's a universal religion now, as extreme tolerance to all other civilizational models. So if we look towards China, Russia, there's no existent tolerance for it. So we have this weird combination where we struggle with nihilism at home, yes, complete intolerance that anyone would pursue a different pathway. So it is, it's an interesting development. Uh, but in
But
terms of, yeah,
getting back to Nietzsche, uh, yes, but Nietzsche, well, the death of God and all that, I would put Nietzsche's views in the zombie stage. You see, and of course, losing your religion in the zombie stage is can be quite horrible. I'm quite well when you look when you try to analyze the rise of Nazism in Germany. Look at the map of the Nazi Party in 1932 and or even 1933. It will be the great precision, the map of Protestant Germany, where beliefs have just collapsed. But uh, uh, Nazi Germany was at the zombie stage, so they had values, unfortunately, values of uh, authority and inequality of individuals, of people, of races, you see. So there was it's structure in the Nazi madness, structure inherited from Lutheranism, you see, or this Northern German Lutheranism. The stage we've reached now is is a little different or very different. It's just now we're very close to nothing. You see, see, we talk. Of course, we talk a lot about values. It's just amazing. The word values is everywhere. Everybody's got values. Everybody talks about values, our values, and so on. But to me, this is a clear sign that there's nothing left. When you have values, you express uh, uh, specific elements. You do not use the word values all the time. You see, I mean, I'm quite. This is sort of. I have a few logical rules in uh, in my intellectual life. Is that when people start talking a lot about something, you don't know why, but suddenly the theme topic appears, and and very often it's and people said definite things about for instance values, but the truth is what they mean is that it's the opposite. It's just what they are in fact talking about is the opposite, the complete disappearance of values. And and if we want to understand what's happening in Europe these days, which is the new lust for war in Europe, and especially Northern Europe, this, uh, in my view, is not connected with liberal values or intolerant liberal values or anything, but this is connected with a complete lack of values. There's one thing I forgot. This is the in my earlier descriptions of the what I more and more call the zero stage. You see, to me the emphasis was on the disappearance of religious inherited values, work ethics. Even speculated on the weakening of the superego and the diminishing size of the real individual in a situation where there's no collective to support things like honor, courage, and so on. But there's something obvious that sort of escaped me. It's that the together with the zero stage comes a complete disappearance of any vision of the future. You see, it's there's a well, there's emptiness, but the most frightening part of emptiness is that no vision of the future. So if you look at the now the well, I'm quite surprised by the way the Europeans and the European Union is turning into a bellicist, what do you say, or sort of warmongering organization without an army or without the possibility of waging war on any reasonable scale and so on. But the obsession with war and continuing a war that's already lost, and in my view, or in my most recent view, this has to do with something to do with the fact that the European Union as a project is completely dead, and that there's and has reached well, our elites. Although the word elite is perhaps too much to describe these people, or so-called elites, uh, uh, that lost their faith in the European Union. They've lost any vision of the future, and this is the moment when war can appear as a solution. You see, I think to me the European Union um, was very much a zombie stage thing. The first, well, this has noticed and written about so many times. The first European Union was the first with France, Germany, Italy at the center, the old European Union was at a great deal to do with Christian democracy, but not any kind of Christian democracy. Christian democracy in the moment when religious beliefs had started disappearing. And so I would say the European Union was a zombie stage thing, and the warmongering union we have now is a zero stage thing.
It's a interesting observation there. When one is obsessed about talking about something, usually if you have it, you don't have to talk. You see now in the United States with the pending economic disaster coming, the politicians can't stop talking about how great America is, how it's the greatest power in the world, how their economy is brilliant. I mean, you don't have to repeat this in every sentence if it actually is the case, but I think it's very correct. And the same line, the Europeans as well, they can't stop talking about their values. But whenever I talk to yes, geopoliticians, they always point out that the very curious case of Europe these days is that there's a strategic vacuum. No one can communicate where they want to go, how they can get there. Instead, it's always this emotional rhetoric, and again, reference to values. But I think this behind the strategic vacuum might indeed be what you suggest, just an emptiness that as the values collapses, what is there left? I mean, yeah, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but these days when I look at Europe, we don't have to think twice about supporting jihadists in Syria. We can back open Nazis. We have this obsession with war. We no longer believe in diplomacy. I mean, it's very extraordinary that and then the next sentence they will say how wonderful our values are. So no, it's there is something more profound there, and I think rather than just a decline in GDP, as you know, as you suggest. But you've also argued though that the West misreads not just its own power, but also the power of rising, rivals or blocks. Why do you think this is?
Well, it's well, there's the narcissistic element in the zero stage, obviously. So, but perhaps it's well, I mean, Western dominance has started perhaps in the 16th century, and perhaps I consider myself as a Westerner. I'm nothing else. I'm a typical left-wing liberal. You see, I'm a completely uninteresting person in ideological terms, and but I, uh, and perhaps, perhaps I think you understand the situation. I understand the situation, and uh, I, I guess we agree on many things, but we must show compassion to the to 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 our so-called elites and blind elites. It's or even to the population. Perhaps it's just um, difficult to realize that things are changing, that the days of Western dominance are over, and and perhaps people need a little time to digest the information. You see, but perhaps we shouldn't be too hard on them, because we we got so used to being so strong, and now realizing that it's the Chinese uh, that we can put an embargo on the US concerning rare earth and so on, and the game is over. Uh, Perhaps we need a little time to adjust.
Yeah, that's a good point. Everything is happening with such backbreaking speed that it's very difficult to absorb these things. I mean, only a few years ago we were told that Francis Fukuyama's end of history was had come true, that the world would forever be organized under liberal democracy, free markets, and Western leadership, and suddenly we look the other way for a second as we celebrate our greatness, and it's all gone. So I fully appreciate that perspective, though. But if again, we're both Westerners, we would prefer not to see the the defeat of the West, even though it does appear that it's more or less irreversible as well, making it much worse. But if Western nations try to reverse this trend, though, well, what can be done? What kind of reforms? We elect you to take over after Macron. Well, what direction can we take to reverse some of these things? Because you're not just talking about some economic development projects. You're talking about the very deep-rooted structures of society and the family and faith.
Yes, I'm very bad at producing ideologies myself. You see, this is my weakness. I think I can be pretty efficient at describing what happens, but in a sort of I'm not saying that I'm just an amused observer of the passing show, but there's a little bit of this. You see, and I've no no. There was a time when I was quite militant about Europe or the US turning to protectionism, trying to protectionism is a type of collective action. Well, this is what the Chinese have been practicing for years, and other countries too. But as far as reversing the trends is concerned, I have in fact lost hopes. Lost hope. The I think we're very close. We haven't reached the we say the absolute climax of thing. We now see that what we see is failure in Ukraine. What we see is an inability of the US to really control or stop Chinese development. But there's still, well, there's something ahead of us that we must expect, and which will have massive consequences, and that will be the complete collapse of Ukraine, because we'll get out of the now. Well, I don't know about Norway, the US, or Germany, but the media in France produce well, they're still completely out of. They live in a sort of a parallel reality. You see, they admit some difficulties around Pokrovsk, but this the extent of the collapse that's ahead of us is not visible at all on our screens. So I think it is when we reach that moment that mentalities will be redefined, and that perhaps psychological, sociological, well, mental things will happen. You see, it's when reality imposes itself on us, on everybody, and then we'll see. I'm not especially worried by what comes next. It's because I'm well, we had all these talks about the Russian, well, the mad talk about a Russian invasion of Europe. Say they and the eternal Russian threat, and or even if you look at Asia, the inevitable rise of China. Well, I'm a demographer. I mean that I spent decades at the most of my life at the French Institut National d'Études Démographiques, and the, there's something is common to the whole advanced world, and this includes the West and Russia, China, and well, all the advanced world, and that's very low birth rates and soon declining populations. So when the war in Ukraine is over, and it will be over someday, and I believe after uh, a Russian victory of some kind, a very clear Russian victory, in fact. But then we'll all, but we will be left with weak states everywhere. You see, it's because well, even in the U.S., the fertility rate is collapsed, and there's no the case of China is even more interesting. I think that the fertility rate now must be 1.1 child per woman. Realize, take well, India and China about the same population, even if the Chinese population has started a slow decline, slow for the moment, decline, and is now a little under that of India, but they're very comparable. And so, and every year you will have something like 22 million births in India and 9 million in China. I mean, the demographic collapse is just, well, scary in a way. And so there's no, of course, the US will not be able to overtake the Chinese in technical terms. Probably we are, well, just at the moment when innovation in China is about to be quicker than innovation in the US, but for a time, and then we'll have a crisis in China, as we'll have a crisis everywhere. This applies to Russia also, with a 1.5 child per woman birth rate. So the world, well, if you take the US out of the picture, I mean, the collapse of the US system might very well open a wonderful period of peace where people have time to think and to find solutions, perhaps define not ideologies, but new systems of thought, you see, will have time. The situation was very different in 1918 or even 1945. I mean, the zombie stage, where all in those days, the wars that had much to do with national power increasing everywhere, you see. you had an expansion of populations before the First World War, and the German population was growing at a rate was much greater than that of France, but the Russian population was also growing at a rate much higher than that of Germany, and everybody was getting more powerful, but at different rates, and everybody was frightened, and then we had the First World War, and then pause, and society is still at the energy to get into an even more bloody war, the Second World War. They still had a lot of energy to fight. And even after the Second World War, there was still enough energy left for a new takeoff. I mean, what we call it France, the Trente Glorieuses, but with very positive rates of growth. This is not the situation today. We've got aging populations and diminishing populations, and but I've no program for the future. But I guess well, if the US and Germany do not go completely crazy, we'll have time.
Well, it is interesting, some of the contradictions, as you said. For China, we see a technological and economic development never seen before in history. But on the other hand, the population is collapsing very, very quickly. So, anyways, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I can't stop reading your books, so they are really, really fascinating. I can't recommend it enough, and I hope you can come back on again sometime.
Yes.
This is
Yes, thanks for inviting me, and please forgive me for my very disconnected and free talk.
No, I appreciate it very much. So thanks again.
Thank you.